Welcome to the Deep Dive.
The show where we take your essential reads and turn them into, well, pure insight.
Today we're looking at something that feels like an elephant in the room of the global energy market. It's this massive, almost hidden supply of crude oil.
And it's just sitting there waiting. We're talking about Iran's huge operational oil reserve, and it's all floating on the high seas right now.
Yeah, this isn't about oil deep underground. This is 166 million barrels of crude literally loaded onto tankers, ready to go.
It really is the ultimate market wildcard.
It is. So our mission in this deep dive is to get into the source material. We're talking analysis from Coupler, S&P Global, and some projections from UBS.
Right. And we want to understand three things. First, how did Iran even build up this record stockpile?
Second, what's their capacity to, actually disrupt the market?
And third, the really fascinating part, the mechanics of this secret fleet operation that makes it all possible.
It really is a story of volatility just waiting for a political trigger. If you track commodities or, frankly, just geopolitical stability, this is something you need to know about.
Exactly. We're dealing with hard numbers that, kind of fly in the face of what we think sanctions can do.
Okay, let's start there with the hard numbers. The thing that jumps out from all the sources is just the sheer volume.
It is a staggering amount of crude oil and condensate they've piled up in floating storage.
And the record figure as of mid-January was 166 million barrels.
Right, and the data from Coupler confirms this is the highest they've ever seen, going all the way back to 2016.
So 166 million barrels, it's one of those numbers that's so big it's hard to grasp.
It is. So let's try to put that into context for you. That volume, it's about 1.5 days of the entire planet's oil production.
1.5 days. Okay, so on a global scale, maybe not catastrophic?
Well, not if it's released over time, but think about it regionally. That same stock could cover, say, all of Spain's oil needs for about 50 days.
50 days.
Or even more, about 4 months of consumption for a country like France.
Wow. And the key is, this isn't oil stuck in a well.
Exactly. This is oil that's ready to sail. It's accessible.
And it belongs to Iran, which, even with all these sanctions, is still a giant in the oil world.
A huge player. The sources really emphasize this. They're one of the world's largest producers.
And they have, what, the world's third largest proven reserves?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
That ranking gets debated a little depending on, how you value Venezuela's claims. But regardless, they are absolutely a top-tier player.
They're the third largest producer just within OPEC.
That's right. And their output covers something like 4% of total global demand.
That 4% is such a crucial figure, especially when you compare Iran to other sanctioned countries.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Venezuela. They export maybe 350,000 barrels a day.
Okay.
Iran, on the other hand, is estimated to be exporting closer to 2 million barrels a day, even with the sanctions.
So that 166 million barrels isn't just symbolic.
No, it's a very real physical stockpile that gives them this incredible ability to influence the market basically instantly.
Right.
It's why some analysts call it a bomb just waiting to go off.
Which brings us to the next big question. The strategy. Why? Why is Iran piling up all this oil at sea?
Right. Why would you take on the huge costs of floating storage?
It just seems incredibly expensive.
It is. And analysts like Homayoun Shahi at Coupler, they point to two main reasons. The first one is basically just industrial maintenance.
Meaning they have to keep the pumps running.
Exactly. They can't afford to just shut down production. Imagine their traditional buyers, say some Chinese refineries, maybe they hit their import quotas or their own storage is full.
So Iran can't sell it, but they can't stop pumping it either.
Because restarting that whole infrastructure later would be catastrophically expensive and technically very, very difficult. So stockpiling is just a very high-stakes way to warehouse your product and stay ready.
But I have to ask about that cost. A very large crude carrier, a VLCC, is supposed to be moving, earning money. Isn't it just enormously costly to use 86 of them as floating tanks?
It seems that way, doesn't it? But the analysts argue that the long-term, systemic cost of shutting down a national oil industry.
The equipment, the labor, future contracts.
All of it. That cost is way higher than the cost of using these vessels for storage, especially since a lot of these ships are already part of their parallel system anyway.
Okay, that makes some sense. And you said there was a second reason.
I did. And this one provides a much stronger justification for the expense. Geopolitical risk mitigation.
Protection.
Precisely. Floating storage helps protect those barrels from being, say, confiscated or even destroyed in a conflict.
So they're moving the product away from the danger zone.
They are. They're sending many of these tankers away from the very crowded, very high-risk Persian Gulf and getting them closer to major commodity hubs in Asia. It just reduces their risk.
Which requires an incredible level of sophistication. And I think that brings us to the real star of this deep dive, Iran's parallel fleet.
Ah, yes. The shadow operation.
How on earth do they move and store so much crude while under such intense Western scrutiny?
It's a massive maritime ghost operation. We're looking at a parallel fleet of around 170 vessels in total.
170.
But the really critical figure is the tanker fleet inside that. They have 86 very large crude carriers, VLCCs.
86 supertankers. To put that in perspective, many national shipping lines don't even operate that many.
It's a staggering capacity. We're talking 34.2 million tons deadweight, all of it dedicated to one thing, evading sanctions.
So how do they do it? How does this fleet stay under the radar? Is it just a bunch of shell companies?
Well, shell companies and, opaque ownership structures are definitely part of it.
Mm.
But the key mechanism is actually simpler and much more aggressive.
What's that?
They just turn off their transponders. Their automated identification systems, or AIS.
They just go dark.
They vanish. They disappear from the global tracking grid. And this allows them to do what's called dark transshipment.
So they meet up with another ship in secret.
Far out at sea, yeah. Often in Southeast Asian waters. And they transfer the cargo from the Iranian link tanker to another one, often an older vessel. It effectively launders the oil's origin.
And this whole clandestine network is what they call the pariah market.
Exactly. It shields their trade, lets them move huge volumes that would otherwise be seized.
So this shadow supply chain is the reason that 166 million barrels is actually a threat. Without the fleet, the oil's just stuck.
Absolutely. The fleet is what turns their geological reserves into real economic leverage. Which brings us to, well, the so what of all this.
The hypothetical market impact.
What happens if this whole game changes?
So let's talk about that political trigger. What happens if, say, sanctions were eased? What's the immediate effect?
The market reacts to just the idea of it. We've seen in the past that even a slight easing of tensions between the U.S. and Tehran can cause crude prices to drop by more than 3% in a single day.
Just on speculation.
Just on speculation. The market knows this supply is out there and it dreads its release.
Okay, so let's model that out. The flood scenario. If Iran starts to gradually release that stored oil, let's say a manageable number, like 500,000 barrels a day.
500,000 barrels per day, yeah. That's a very achievable number for them to manage consistently.
And what does that do to the global supply?
Well, here's the critical part. They could keep that up for almost a full year before that stored supply runs out.
For a year. So it's not a one-off shock. It's a long, sustained disruption.
A sustained pressure. And when you look at the global surplus that's already projected, that 500,000 barrels becomes deeply influential.
How so?
Let's use the data point from UBS. They're projecting a global oil surplus for 2026 of around 1.9 million barrels per day already.
Okay, so the world is already expecting more supply than demand.
Right. Now, if Iran adds another 500,000 barrels per day into that mix, you're increasing that forecasted surplus by about 30%.
30%.
That kind of sustained supply increase would without a doubt put serious downward pressure on oil prices. It would cause major headaches for OPEC and for Russia.
Who are all trying to cut supply to keep prices up.
Exactly. This would completely undermine their strategy.
So the decision to release it is purely political, which leads to this tightrope walk happening in Washington. The sources say analysts are completely split on this.
They are. And the debate is fierce. On one side, you have firms like BCA Research. They suggest that the regime in Tehran is showing signs of internal weakness right now.
Oh, okay.
So their conclusion is that this creates an opportunity that's, quote, too good for the U.S. to pass up.
Meaning they should push for direct action, maybe through allies like Israel?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Push for major concessions, maybe even regime change, and you accept that oil prices might spike because of the instability. The geopolitical goal comes first.
Okay, so that's one camp. Prioritize exploiting the weakness, even if it hurts at the pump.
Right. But the other camp of analysts is very, very skeptical of that.
Yeah.
Especially now, given the domestic political climate in the U.S.
They're focused on inflation.
They argue the number one political strategy for the White House is keeping American consumers happy by fighting inflation. And the easiest way to do that is to keep energy prices low.
And any kind of military action or direct intervention almost guarantees a price spike.
It completely undermines that core domestic priority. So that's the tightrope. It's a choice between two competing goals.
Leverage Iran's perceived weakness on the world stage or prioritize cheap gas for voters.
It's a classic foreign policy dilemma. And those 166 million barrels of oil just make the stakes very visible and very immediate.
It is fascinating. The fate of global oil prices really does hinge on which of those domestic American priorities wins out.
And what's really amazing is how effective Iran has been at creating this operational buffer for themselves. They've forced the world to accept that their oil is always there, always potentially available.
So, to summarize the core takeaway from this deep dive, Iran is holding a massive, accessible oil reserve on the water.
And it's only possible because of the operational ingenuity of this parallel fleet.
And if the political conditions shift, even just a little, that 166 million barrels could instantly reshape global supply, tanking crude prices.
The short-term potential for disruption is just immense. But we can't stop there. We have to look further out.
Because the long-term potential for Iran with its reserves is enormous.
It is, and that's where you find the ultimate paradox in all of this.
Which is?
The Middle East, as a region, has the lowest onshore production costs on Earth. It's just cheap to get the oil out of the ground.
So logically, Iran, with the third largest reserves, should be set to become an even bigger global player over time.
They should be. But the sources all point to this one critical weakness. A technology bottleneck.
Because of the sanctions.
Decades of them. The Iranian oil sector has been starved of foreign investment, of cutting-edge drilling techniques, of modernization.
So they can pump oil cheaply today, but they don't have the tech to really ramp up production for the long term.
That is the challenge. And so here's the provocative thought I want to leave you with as you watch all of this unfold.
Okay.
Will that massive geological advantage, the dirt cheap costs of extraction, will that eventually win out? Will Iran find the partners and the technology to scale up dramatically? Or will that technology deficit, that lack of modern infrastructure, permanently limit their ability to become a true energy superpower, even if all the sanctions were lifted tomorrow? The future of their immense reserves might not be decided by politics, but by technology.